Welcome to the Sports Gazette International Women's Day special with football legend Eniola Aluko. I'm Sarah Wilmore, golf editor at the Sports Gazette and host of the Women's Golf Podcast, and I'm joined by two female sports journalists.
I'm Yasmine Ryder, Olympic editor of the Sports Gazette and track and field athlete.
Hello, I'm Tess, Derry, a sports photographer and keen football writer. Eni is currently sporting director at Aston Villa Women, has over 100 England caps and won multiple honours for her playing careers at Chelsea and Juventus.
Eni also has a first-class law degree, is a renowned author and was the first female pundit on BBC Match of the Day.
Eni was involved in a high-profile racism case against the FA, and thanks to her persistence for change, she finally received an apology 5 years after England manager Mark Sampson made racist remarks towards her and another player. Hi Eni, how are you?
Hi Sarah, all good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're all pretty good, thank you. So thank you so much for joining us for this special International Women's Day podcast.
No worries.
When we saw the theme, Choose to Challenge, we did think of you, so we are very grateful that you're here and very excited to talk to you too.
Cheers, thank you. Yeah, it's a good theme. It's a good sounding theme.
Yeah. So what else are you doing for International Women's Day besides this podcast?
I've done quite a few talks actually. I did 2 yesterday, which was really good. I did one with Deloitte, and one with I'm doing another one later on this afternoon. So pretty busy. But I always love International Women's Day because it's just a great chance to engage and have really good conversations. So
yeah, you're certainly a pioneer of women's football. You've got more than 100 caps for England, which is really impressive. And you've inspired so many young girls. How important is it to you to inspire the next generation of female footballers?
Yeah, no, it's really important for me because ultimately, when I grew up, I didn't necessarily have lots of female accessible role models that I could see on TV. So to kind of be what I couldn't see when I was growing up, I think is really important, and it shows sort of the generational development for women's football. So yeah, I take it very seriously. But I also know that I'm not perfect. So it comes with sort of, sometimes it comes with a pressure that you don't want. You want to be able to kind of live your life and make your mistakes without being sort of scrutinized and judged. But ultimately, I want to be able to, to show that the best version of myself as a woman, as a Black woman, is inspiring and aspirational, and others growing up can do it too. That's what I want to represent. I want my purpose to be centered around, inspiring others to be the best version of themselves in whatever they do.
Well, I know growing up, you've previously said that Serena Williams and the Williams sisters were a big inspiration for you. What impact did they have on your progression as an athlete, watching them play?
Yeah, no, well, I think because it was very difficult to see female role models growing up in football, I kind of had to sort of get it from tennis. Yeah. And so the Williams sisters, for me, were the sort of most identifiable thing to what I felt like I could be, although it was a different sport. And they were just amazing. I remember putting beads in my hair like the Williams sisters and really trying to imitate them and copy them because, that was the closest thing to sort of identifiable Black female role models that I had in sport. And, I've followed the Serena Williams in particular ever since. So for me, it was like, it was the closest thing because I didn't have many female role models in football. So they, the Williams sisters were very much that replaced that for me in tennis.
Well, you certainly had some difficulties through your professional career. You did receive some racist remarks from the former England manager, Mark Sampson, but you chose to challenge them in a way that no player had previously done. How did it feel to raise that issue and change the game for young Black women coming through?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say that, my whole life, my whole career is not defined by that difficult situation. I think we tend to skip a lot of my life, which was very positive. I had over 80 caps before that incident with Mark Sampson happened. So I really like to make sure that, there's a lot of balance when we talk about this issue, because, I think it's very easy to think that my whole career was defined by that issue when it wasn't. I had a very good, successful career prior to Mark Sampson becoming the manager. It was a difficult time in my career. And ultimately I chose to sort of stand in my truth and understand that, I was going to lose out on my England career as a result of that, and standing against discrimination and racism. But ultimately that's what I had to do in that moment. I had to be very honest about the culture that was, in the England team at the time, I felt, and was treating people, Black women differently. Has the game changed as a result of it? I'm not sure. I would like to think that if it happened again for any player, Black, white, brown, doesn't matter. They wouldn't be treated, in the way I was treated, in sort of being dismissed and, a smear campaign being kind of, through the media. But, I look at the game now and I still think it's quite concerning, in the sense that there's almost minimal diversity within the game. There's not a lot of Black female players in the England team. The England team at the moment is almost exclusively white. So I don't know if we've still got a long way to go. But I would hope that my case helped to shine a light on some of the things that the game needs to improve on, and sort of make sure that it kind of never happens again.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously bringing that issue to light definitely showed people that there was some issue there. But obviously you alluded to, you did have a very successful career, playing for England, Chelsea, Juventus, one of the most successful female footballers the country's ever seen, and footballer, not just female. What was the highlight of your career?
Oh, there was a few. I've had a few. I think in terms of, clubs, I think my most successful period was at Chelsea. And I feel that winning the FA Cup in 2015 was probably the biggest highlight for me, because it was the first FA Cup held at Wembley. It was the first trophy for Chelsea of a long period where we kind of came very close, but, we didn't quite win. So that was a big moment for all of us and for me personally. And then I think playing in the Olympics too was an incredible experience. It was bigger than football, really. Playing in the Olympics, it was really kind of the game changer for women's football at the time, in terms of like where women's football was before the Olympics, and sort of how quickly it became something respected by, fans and media and all the leagues and the FA, etc. So yeah, it's, I have many highlights, but those two stick out in particular.
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier this week actually about the Olympics and how it changed women's sport. And it's really interesting to hear from you that you found that a defining moment in women's football. And I know you obviously had a very successful career at Chelsea, and Tess is actually a massive Chelsea supporter. And I know
oh, wow. Okay, good.
So yeah, I think she has a few questions for you about Chelsea and your other football career highlights, and now working at Aston Villa.
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to speak to you about your role as a women's sporting director at Aston Villa. I wondered, since taking the role, what challenges you've faced and also what you've really enjoyed in that time.
Well, in terms of what I've really enjoyed, it's quite a multifaceted role. I like the variety of the role. I manage everything from recruitment to the professional experience of the players. So everything from, where we train, the facilities, the professional setup, nutrition. Obviously I manage the technical team as well. And then off the pitch as well, it's kind of, what's the brand of Aston Villa, building that brand, launching an education program called Students of the Game, which I'm very proud of, that invests in the education of female players, and the club pays towards tuition fees. These are all things that I work on sort of on a daily basis. So the variety has been really, really good, and it allows me to tap into different skill sets that I have. I think in terms of the challenges, it's been, I think the transition from semi-professional to professional was a very, was difficult transition, in the sense that you're really changing mindsets. I joined Villa just before a promotion, and it was a very positive time for the team, and there was lots of, positivity about promotion. But I also had to kind of have the message of, well, it's not going to be necessarily going to be enough when we go to the WSL, which is one of the toughest leagues in the world. So it was about recruiting more players. It was about pushing for more. It's about challenging for more. And often people resist that. People resist change. People resist, moving to the next level. It's a bit like, when you're in the gym and you've got a personal trainer and you think 5 runs is enough, but he's pushing you to do 8. You're going to hate, you're going to dislike the personal trainer in that moment. And that was kind of my job, to push it to the next level. And there was some resistance to that. So that was challenging, but nothing that, we haven't been able to get through. And I think that, this season, the WSL, it's been challenging, and the results haven't gone our way for the most part. But I think, there's been a lot of learning and a lot of developing, and hopefully we can reach our objective at the end of the season of staying in the league and continuing to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really positive that there's so many more women's teams now, and more coming through from, support from the men's teams, also providing, more funding and stuff for the women's teams, which is really positive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mentioned the Olympics. I think one of the benefits after the Olympics was that, like, a lot of the professional men's teams then started to see the real value in, having equivalent women's teams. So what you had was, lots of professional players being able to have the opportunity to play professionally with professional resources, with a really good financial backing from, the equivalent men's teams. And I think if you look at the WSL now, it's pretty much a mirror of the Premier League, in terms of every single club in the WSL, bar, I think Bristol, has a Premier League men's equivalent, which I think says a lot for the model of sort of how the women's game is developing, and now we can start to tap into fan bases as well that are sort of existing fan bases of the men's game. So it's really promising, and I think the league has come on leaps and bounds, and the FA have really done well in sort of developing the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And are Aston Villa actually doing anything to mark International Women's Day?
I don't think so. Not that I know of. I think I would know if they were. But we also have a very busy game schedule. So often, with all the good intentions, playing games is the most important thing. We've got a big game against Manchester United this weekend. So maybe there was not enough time to fit it all in and get players to kind of... Oh, actually, sorry, rewind. Yes, we have done... Cadbury is a sponsor of our Students of the Game program, and Cadbury is also a sponsor of the club, a club sponsor. And I think there was players doing an IWD campaign with Cadbury. So yes, we have done something. Sorry, excuse me.
That's good. After Greg Clark's dismissal by the FA, after making discriminatory comments, it's quite clear there needs to be a more diverse board. Is chairman of the FA a role in football that you would consider taking on?
Wow. Why? I mean, I think I definitely not now. I don't think I'd be ready or have enough experience for that role now. But certainly, in future, why not? Never say never. I'm passionate about the women's game. I'm passionate about the men's game. I'm passionate about football. I understand, I think now, what executive life looks like, the business side of the game as well. But that's something I need to continue growing. I've just started a football finance course as well to understand sort of all the sort of financial side of the game as well. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm as well versed in the game, business side of the game as possible, and I'll continue to kind of take opportunities within my career that elevate me. But you never know. But certainly not now.
Do you think it's realistic that we'll see a female chairman of the FA in our lifetime?
I'd like to think it is. I'd like to think that is a realistic aim. I think the question almost implies the problem. The fact that we even say, is it realistic, means that nowadays we still don't have enough women at leadership roles in some of these sort of traditionally male-dominated areas. So we have to try and change that. I don't think you can go from 0 to 100 straight away. I think, if there's 10 seats at the table, you start from going from 1 to maybe 3, and that starts to change the influence in the culture, and then 3 to 5, and that changes the influence in the culture. So I think we have to change incrementally, but certainly it needs to improve. And I think women also need to see themselves as capable of those roles. Traditionally, I think women sabotage themselves and say, well, I haven't got enough experience, or, I haven't done enough to be considered to be a leader or an executive. And often men who are less qualified apply anyway. So as women, we need to keep putting our name in the ring as well to make sure that we are part of the conversation.
Absolutely. And I guess as well as these leadership roles, it's important to have sort of more female coaches involved in the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we do have a really healthy amount of female coaches now, certainly in England. And I know there's a whole sort of pathway scheme for female coaches at the FA that the FA created. I think the most important thing for female coaches is to gain experience. Is to make sure that they're gaining sort of real life experience in the game, because nothing can beat that. Nothing can beat learning how to win on the touchline, learning how to make in-game decisions, learning that, sometimes all of the tactics that you may have got ready for may be completely different when it comes to game day, and being able to adapt to that. I think that's one of the most important things. It's gaining the experience, again, putting yourself up for jobs and roles, or coaching jobs and roles that will give you that real life experience. Because for all the courses that we do, for all the coaching courses that we do, nothing beats real life experience, in my opinion. I did a sporting director course that was really good, but no, there wasn't a coronavirus course. There wasn't a coronavirus module. No one could teach me how to deal, no one could teach me how to manage as a sporting director within a global pandemic.
No, of course.
So it's about, and you guys will know that as students yourself, it's great to learn kind of the theory, but once you get into the actual role, that's when the real sort of learnings, we sort of applies. So that's what I would always encourage for female coaches. Really, really try and get out there and apply your knowledge.
Amazing. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Annie. Lovely to meet you and chat with you today. I'm Yas, by the way.
Hi, Yas.
I just wanted to touch upon the progression that women's football has made over the years. But firstly, often people tend to compare men's football with women's against one another. I wanted to see what you thought about this and whether you think that they should be kept as separate entities or treated as separate entities.
I think that I think that the comparison is sort of to be expected because obviously football is the same sport. But I definitely think it should be, it should be seen as separate entities, because I think the women's game has its own nuances that should be celebrated. I think the women's game is probably a bit more definitely a bit more family friendly. I think that the women's game, there's more emphasis on tactics and skill as opposed to sort of pace and power. So I think there's lots of beautiful nuances within the women's game that, shouldn't be compared to the men's game. But I think that we have to kind of accept that, there will be comparisons because men's football has just been around for so long. But, we should find ways of celebrating the women's game as well, and not sort of be overshadowed by it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. In your opinion, what more does women's football need to do to continue its growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that for me, I think the next step really is to kind of make sure that all of we've had lots of sort of breaking records in terms of broadcasting, particularly for World Cups and European Championships. And often the fan base sort of comes out to watch every 4 years, but it's translating that now to, weekly. So it's being able to say, how do we make sure fans are coming every single week to watch women's football versus now and again? And I think when you do that, then you're going to be able to create sort of a whole economy for women's football. You're going to have paying fans coming every week. You're going to have the broadcasters investing more. You're going to have brands want to invest more because you have a live audience every week coming to watch the game. I think that's the next step, and I think we really need to figure out, and that includes me as well, like figure out how and why that's not happened yet. Like whether we need to change when the season is, maybe we need to change when we play games, whatever that may be, to be able to say, how do we carve out a market for women's football? I think that's really important, because I think that's the game changer for women's football is to build a fan base.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the demand is there. It's just having it kind of a bit more regularly and seeing it maybe covered more would be great.
Yeah, 100%. It's about making sure that that coverage you can kind of relate it to a fan base that wants to come every week. Fans are creatures of habit. Like, we've become creatures of habit, like in terms of our entertainment consumption. You watch Netflix, people like to watch Netflix and watch a series, and every single day they'll tune into that series. In the same way, people want to consume football in that way as well. Every week you want to say, right, I'm going to the football. Women's football still doesn't really have that. It still doesn't really have that regularity of consumer habits. So we have to try and figure out how we get to that point, because I think once we do, it will take off. But I have a lot of optimism about the women's game, because ultimately, if you look at the last 10 years, we haven't, it was nowhere near what it was now. And so that says to me that in the next 10 years, it's going to be another very incredible, exponential growth.
Lots of exciting times ahead then.
Yes, exactly.
What do you think are the main barriers women's football is facing today?
I think that's it. I think what I just said in terms of just fans still feeling like it's not good enough to pay for, or it's it's not it's not as good as the men's game, and there's kind of all these kind of stereotypical comparisons that just prevent the game moving on. For example, there's lots of kind of criticism around goalkeepers in women's game, for example. But a male goalkeeper can make the same mistake in the men's game, and the whole gender is not questioned.
Yeah.
You know, in the women's game, a female goalkeeper makes a mistake and it's, oh my God, women's football's terrible. No, that the goalkeeper made a terrible mistake. But it doesn't mean the whole of the gender is terrible. You know, so we still have that problem where, you know, one sort of issue of the women's game, or, you know, the whole of women's football gets questioned and is put on trial. So we just kind of need to try and move away from that and just create more sort of loyalty within the women's game and respect within the women's game for what it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a shame that women's football gets scrutinised a lot more, it seems, just a bit unfair towards them compared to the men.
Yeah. I mean, I think you say it's unfair. I think it's part of the game. I think, you know, once upon a time, we wanted more scrutiny. We wanted media to care. We wanted people to actually care about what was happening. And now we do have that. That comes with criticism, as there is in the men's game. So I don't mind criticism. I think when the criticism comes, it's like the whole of your gender is questioned. So it's what the criticism is rather than the criticism. You know, I don't mind if, you know, a pundit in the men's game says, oh, you know, that striker should have scored and they're a woman. That's totally fair. That's totally fair criticism. You want that. You want that analysis. But you don't want that to be, well, because that striker didn't score, the whole of the women's game is not even worth watching. Do you see the difference?
Yeah.
That's whereas in the men's game, we don't do that. We don't say, oh, the men's game, the whole men are terrible because, you know, one of them just missed a chance. It's a little bit ridiculous, but that happens a lot.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing out that. Are there any specific reflections from your career where you really found that society has kind of turned a corner or starting to move in the right direction towards like the women's game and the growth of women's football?
Yeah, I think when you see female pundits now on TV talking about the men's game, or you see, you know, female athletes on magazine covers and things like that, you know, that is huge progression, because once upon a time that just wasn't the case. It just didn't happen. When you see you know, record viewing figures for Women's World Cup in comparison to the men, like breaking the men's records, that just didn't happen, you know. So there's been so much progression. There's been so much to kind of really celebrate. And it's about saying, how do we make sure that continues, that upward trend continues?
Yeah. I don't know if you agree, but certainly during the pandemic, it's kind of felt like a lot of the hard work to close the gap between men and women's sport generally has kind of been a bit undone. How do you feel to see like women's sport being cancelled or postponed during that pandemic while men's sport was able to continue?
Yeah, no, it's super frustrating. And again, I think a reflection of where the women's game still is in comparison to the men's game. But I think we've got to remember, you know, the women's game was banned for 50 years. So it's just not going to be where the men's game is. I think once we accept that, then we can sort of move from a realistic place. I think the finances still aren't there to justify, you know, there was a lot of money spent to get men's football back. And actually, you know, a lot of clubs have lost a lot of money. So there was a lot of finance spent to kind of do the testing process and everything like that, which just the women's teams just don't have. So that was frustrating, because obviously it showed a disparity again in terms of finances. But eventually, I think the FA were able to sort of secure funding for the women's game to continue, certainly the elite level of women's football to continue. And that's progress, because once upon a time, it just wouldn't, that, you know, we wouldn't even have a season. There wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't even be in season right now.
Yeah.
So I try and focus on sort of positives. And look, let's also be honest. I think in the grand scheme of a global pandemic, football and sport wasn't the most important thing. So yes, it was frustrating, but also I think we realized that, like, look, you know, it's more important to sort of make sure that people are safe and the NHS is, you know, is not under pressure and things like that. So everything was put into perspective.
I think that's such a positive message also for young and inspiring female athletes, specifically in football, to see the funding from the FA that wouldn't have happened in previous years. So that's a really positive step.
Yeah, it was positive, certainly for the top of the game. I think obviously people will say grassroots sport got cancelled as well, but I think grassroots sport across women and men got cancelled. So there was no sort of discrimination in that. I just think the pandemic has caused a lot of issues everywhere. So you can't really complain. It's like, it's not, a global pandemic is not ideal for anyone.
No.
So I've tried to kind of have a very appreciative approach to it, because I'm working at a club that we've been able to work through the pandemic. We've been able to continue our season, and so I feel bad to even complain, and in that sense.
I think that's something that we've all looked to, especially in the middle of a pandemic, is those little daily wins.
Exactly, and I think it's a really healthy perspective to have.
Yeah. No, thank you, Eni, for speaking to me. I'm going to pass over to Tess now, I think.
Thank you.
Cheers. I wanted to ask you actually a couple of questions about England and their prospects in the near future, because obviously a new manager and Sarina Wiegman coming in September. Do you think, looking at her previous success with the Netherlands and Euros glory in 2017 and runners up to the World Cup in 2019, do you think maybe she could be the answer to bringing England success in the form of trophies?
Yeah, 100%. I'm really excited about that appointment. I think that, Sarina Wiegman has really kind of transformed the Dutch national team to a world superpower, really. Obviously, they won the European Championships in 2017 and then went on to the World Cup final in 2019. And they have world sort of leading players like Vivian Miedema and Daniel van der Donk and these players. So she comes with a lot of winning pedigree. I think for the last 10 years, England have kind of England have become sort of serial semi-finalists. 2009 under Hope Powell obviously got to the final, and then there was the World Cup semi-final in 2015, and then another semi-final in 2017, and then another semi-final in 2019. So bringing in someone like Wiegman will hopefully push it to that next level to take England to the final and learn how to win. I think that's the next step, and I think she's definitely got the ability to do that.
Absolutely. Also talking about sort of your personal career, I watched you many times for Chelsea. I'm a big fan. So.
Thank you.
And you mentioned earlier sort of, how amazing it was when you played in that first FA Cup women's final held at Wembley in 2015. And, it had a record attendance of over 30,000 fans at the time. How significant did you feel that was? And looking back on it now as well?
Oh, it was so significant. It was honestly it was probably the most significant day of the history of the club, because I think prior to that we were kind of just like playing second fiddle a lot to other teams, and the season before we won, we got to the we got to the final day of the season and we lost the league on the last day, and we kind of felt like a failure. I certainly did, and felt like we just couldn't get over the line. So that day at Wembley was really kind of the start of a whole winning culture, a whole winning mentality that was really going to start the transition from what Chelsea was to what it is now, which is, they win a trophy every year. And once you catch the bug of winning, you're addicted. So 2015 started that, we caught the bug, and that was it. Then it was like, we got to, everyone wants to win every year. So it was really, really significant game, a massive game changer, I think, for Chelsea.
Absolutely. And on that note as well, obviously Emma Hayes has had you know, such amazing success with Chelsea.
Yes.
And, you know, her recently being linked with League One's AFC Wimbledon.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think this is an appropriate, you know, position for her to take, or do you think it's a goal that women should be aiming for in football?
Well, I think it's an appropriate conversation. I definitely think that we need to be having the conversation around women working in the men's game and women having the capability of managing in the men's game. I think Emma Hayes has one of the best jobs in the world managing Chelsea women, and I think that it should be seen in that way. It shouldn't be seen as women's football and men's football. It should be seen as I'm managing one of the best teams in the world. You know, in terms of Emma Hayes, I think Emma Hayes is definitely capable of managing a men's team at the top level. I think that, you know, the idea that, you know, the equivalent to, you know, working with World Cup winning players at Chelsea is AFC Wimbledon is a little bit insulting to those players and to Emma Hayes. But I think, you know, the conversation, it brought that into focus. It brought that sort of question into focus, like what is the same, you know, what is the equivalent? And the equivalent is the managing men's World Cup winners and Champions League winners. Like that is the equivalent. It's the same game. So I was kind of happy that that conversation came up, because it meant that Emma Hayes could really, you know, really address what I think has been a kind of assumed position of the women's game. And I think if there is anyone who's going to be able to do it, it's going to be Emma Hayes in terms of managing in the men's game at the top level.
Yeah, she's been absolutely amazing.
Yes, she has. She really has.
So, Eni, you spoke earlier that success on the pitch comes with criticism, and there was a time where you were fighting for that criticism and for women's game to receive coverage and to be analysed properly. Social media also seems to be that sort of place where it's somewhere that women can express themselves, but equally they do receive criticism, and some of that criticism isn't always about what they're saying, but it can be specifically sexist. In your experience of social media?
My experience with social media has been that, like, it's been a lot of sort of racist abuse. It's been sexist abuse. It's been, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, when I speak on the men's game. But I think social media for everyone is pretty toxic, because, you know, it's just giving people license to just express their own hatred. And it's kind of unpoliced in that way. Ultimately, I think, you know, I treat social media like a diet. You know, I wouldn't eat McDonald's every day because I know it's really bad for me. In the same way, I don't go on Twitter every day, or, you know, well, particularly Twitter every day and read what people are saying. I know it's going to be bad for me. So I sort of consume it in moderation. I use it sort of when I want. I use the block button a lot. And I moderate what I take in, and I moderate who I follow, and I follow lots of inspirational accounts. So when I'm on it, I do see a lot of positive stuff, and obviously, you know, keep up with the news. But I think that's the way we have to consume social media, because otherwise it will control us and we won't control it. And so I have a much healthier relationship with social media now, and I ignore sort of the people that want to use it to spread their hatred, really.
Do you see any positives in social media, perhaps as a place where women can come together and celebrate each other's success and progress that's being made across not just sport, but society in general?
Yeah, for sure. There are positives in terms of, you know, obviously, you know, being able to unite and get a message across, and make sure that, you know, support is being shown. You know, widespread support is being shown around the world. It's definitely made the world smaller as well. So, you know, you can connect with women, you know, all over the world through social media. So yeah, of course, there's positives to it, but I think I almost feel like we're getting to the point where the negatives have outweighed the positives, and we just need to be so careful about, you know, how we're using social media. But yeah, there's definitely the right way to use it, and it's pretty powerful in that way.
Yeah, well, Sports Gazette recently spoke to Max Rushton, who's the host of the Football Weekly podcast, and he spoke about social media as well, and said that to start with, he did try to argue against people, but then he felt that actually gave them airtime.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He now actually enjoys the idea of just totally ignoring them and that they're shouting at a brick wall effectively.
Right, exactly.
But also he did say that he was very fortunate that none of the comments attack his race, gender or sexuality. You mentioned there about the block button. How do you respond now, and how have you perhaps responded previously to any unpleasant comments that you receive online?
Yeah, I sometimes used to engage in it, which I think, is a very human response. Like, you want to be able to kind of say, how dare you, or, how can you say that? But ultimately, you're dealing with people who are just, who are probably really unhappy in their own lives and are really kind of, they have nothing going for them, their own life. So they come and attack you. So there's just really no point in, engaging with idiots, really. But I also think there is sort of time to help to try and educate people. Like, if people don't know something, you can help to kind of say, well, that's racist because of this, or that's racist because of that. I tried to do that. Yesterday I was tweeting about Meghan Markle and sort of, what I feel is a very racist sort of media campaign against Meghan Markle. And, a lot of people sort of tried to come with the whole, well, it's not racist because, and it's like, well, this is why it is a pattern. It is typing. It is kind of vilifying, and some people, may learn something from that, may understand that there's a different perspective. So I try as much as possible to use social media, but I find Twitter very reductive. You can't really have a nuanced conversation on Twitter because the whole point of Twitter is to kind of be very kind of them and us. It's a very divisive platform, I think. And, I find Instagram a much more positive platform, and you can control sort of much more positive conversation. So.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with you there. I've had an Instagram account for a few years now and decided to join Twitter about a year ago, and it definitely feels like a more confrontational social media.
It's super toxic. Yeah, it's super toxic. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you almost have to treat it like a diet, just, don't consume it every day. It's not good for you. Yeah.
And obviously we're just starting out our careers in the media, so to be able to hear from you about the best dealing with things is really, really helpful.
It's very good to be, it's very good, I think, as people in the media, to be aware of how your writing or your platform can really affect other people. I think for a long time, journalists have always just been like, well, I have the freedom to be a journalist. It's like, yeah, you do, but you also have to understand, like, your use of words, your use of stereotypes, your use of that really kind of can play into a lot of the racism and division and hatred in society. So it's really good that, to be conscious of that and understand how you are communicating as a journalist, because people really consume that. People take it as gospel and people take it as true,
Well, I know that's something that all three of us are really keen to do, is to make sure that our journalism's accurate, but also that we're making sport and sports journalism a positive place to encourage others to be part of our community. You've spoken about self-validation and how feeling confident in yourself enabled you to feel free on social media and not care so much about likes and shares. How did you build that self-confidence, and what advice would you give to other young women and girls?
It's taken a while. I have to admit, it's taken a while to build that self-confidence. I've when I was younger, I was kind of somebody that really wanted to be accepted and liked. And, I really spent a lot of time trying to kind of convince people that, I'm worthy to be liked. And, that's quite a dangerous place, because, the same person that can applaud you can be the same person that sort of turns their back on you or criticizes you as well. So I think it's really about making sure that you have the ability to love yourself and have enough confidence within yourself and validate yourself, so that the external validation is just a bonus. I think there's a lot of power in being able to say, no, I believe in myself, and to look in your mirror every day and to have the voices in your head that say, no, I'm good enough. I'm good enough to do this. And when you fail, equally be able to say, okay, I failed, but I can go again and I can learn from this situation. I think that's when you really feel powerful in life. You really feel like, you can really dictate your own happiness if it all starts from you.
That's really powerful. Thank you for that, Eni. What do you think needs to change with social media to reduce a lot of this hatred that seems to get shared around?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple, to be honest. I think that I think on Twitter in particular, I think we need to have more accountability. I think everybody on Twitter should have, unless you're exempt and you sort of have, a privacy matter where, maybe you're a journalist in, I don't know, war-torn country and you have to keep your identity safe. I think unless you have some special exemption, I think everybody should sign up to the platform with an ID. And I think what that does is that it makes Twitter's faceless. I think now it makes it sort of much more accountable to identity. It stops people creating different accounts to troll. I find it hilarious because people argue and say, well, my privacy. And it's like, well, if you look at all these fitness apps, you look at all these sort of fitness watches, literally everything down to how much you sleep, you eat, your heart rate, when you pee, everything is measured. And people are quite happy to give that information away on apps, but don't want to do it on Twitter. It boggles my mind. So I genuinely think that's the answer. And I think Twitter need to really be honest now and make that happen, because once upon a time the argument was, well, we're just the postman. We are, in terms of Twitter, the platform that just kind of delivers the message. We don't shoot the messenger. But then they sort of disabled Donald Trump's account. I was like, oh, so you can do it. You can, completely disarm someone's account if they're spreading hatred. So I think now is the time to really kind of step it up and, to just create more accountability on those platforms.
Yeah, well, it feels frustrating that, especially like you alluded to Twitter there, it feels like they try to just appeal to popular opinion and who they do. And it's frustrating that people can hide behind this wall of anonymity.
Right, exactly. I think once that's taken away, to be honest, you will see a lot less. You will see a lot less abuse. It's like it's human behavior. People don't just walk out on the street and commit a crime in broad daylight unless you're really mad. But if they're anonymous, they're probably more likely to. On Twitter, there's the anonymity, and the anonymity is the problem, I think. And the minute you kind of lift that veil, I think you will have a lot less abuse, for sure.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Just a final question from us, Eni. Drawing on Sarah's question about advice for young women and girls, if you could give one piece of advice to young and inspiring sportswomen today, what would that be?
For sportswomen, I definitely think it would be, I'll give you two. I think the first one would be, it goes back to what I was just saying about self-validation. I think that's super powerful. And I think that, when you realize that the applause is, the external applause and the white noise is dangerous, and actually your internal applause is what's most important. You really go to another level in terms of your internal power and your internal ability to navigate through life. So I would really encourage that. Really get to know yourself better and develop your self-confidence, and surround yourself with people that equally make you feel good and make you feel confident and can be honest with you from a place of love. And I think secondly, it will be about use your voice, use your platform, use your voice, inspire, be positive, tell people it can be done, tell other young girls it can be done through just showing what you do on your platform. I think that's super powerful as well.
Yeah, they're two great pieces of advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eni, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Really insightful and very lovely to talk to you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I wish you all the best in everything you're doing in your careers. The future, I think that the future is definitely female.
Some inspiring words to finish there from Eniola Aluko. Tess, Yasmine and I really enjoyed chatting with Eni for this Sports Gazette special. Thank you so much for listening, and we'd like to wish you a very happy International Women's Day.